Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Unity Spiritual Center on this fine Sunday morning. We're glad you could join us. Just from Tony. We're going to do a couple of get you woke up songs here a little bit this morning, and our first sing-along is called Heal Me Out to God, and we hope we'll sing it with us. When I wake and the sun lights my face and the world pulls me in its warm embrace, show me how to be all that I could be. Heal me back to God. Oh, doesn't go the way I planned, and my day gets completely out of hand. Help me know that I am where I ought to be. Heal me back to God. Oh, when I feel that my life has slipped away and my voice no longer knows what to say, let love fill and mend my broken heart and heal me back to God. Oh, that was a warm-up, you guys. That was exciting. All right, kind of just mellowing my soul. I don't know what your song is. Is it here? I don't see it. I'll see it.
Sorry, no. Yeah.
I'll see it. Okay, this is a fun song by Jen and Dean, and we're going to ask you to sing along, and the words are pretty hard. They go like this: na 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 na. Say it now. Na 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 na. I'm just learning the song, so thank you. So when we cue you, sing your na na nas, right? I'm going to give you a warm up. It goes like this. Na 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 our best to be moral, leave a legacy behind. Nobody cares about how we've struggled to be a legend in our own mind. Everybody wants to be a hero. Try to skip our claim to fame. But when we take gets up to zero, it's what we give that wins the game.
Yeah, just wait till later. Sean's got a special surprise for you guys.
We're gonna do Footloose, right?
Well, good morning. Yes. Good morning, everyone. And welcome to all those joining us online as well. This is Unity Spiritual Center, where our mission is transforming lives and inspiring people to make a positive difference in our world. I'm Charlie Carr, and I'm going to be the platform assistant this morning. Before we get started, if you would make sure that your cell phones are silenced, and if you'd like to, you can also check in and let the world know they can tune into Unity Spiritual Center live online. We will begin our time together by sharing our opening affirmation. I'll say it once, and I'll have you say it with me. There's only one presence and one power active in my life and in the universe, God the Good, together. There's only one presence and one power active in my life and in the universe, God the Good. This is Unity's foundation principle. One presence, one power, one life, living through and as each one of us. This morning we're going to hear from Dr. Gary. He's doing his talk entitled, I got to turn around because I can't read that, The Unholy Trinity of Separation, Part 3. And then Heidi Sawyer is going to do our meditation this morning. And as I said, we are musically blessed by Sean and Tani, right? Tani? Shani? So if you're able to stand and can join us in our community song, please do so.
Sure. Sing God You Are this morning, and here we go.
Everything Hello, I'm Linda Tweedy and I have the announcements. YOU bake sale today after this service. Pick up a treat and know you are supporting our YOU Getting to Conference and Retreats. The annual meeting is February the 23rd, following the second service, preceded by a lunch by the YOU. We're supporting them big time. Please pick up your community giving letters if you didn't last week. After this week, I'm going to mail the ones that I can. Some of you don't have an address, so if you're a tithely donator and you want a accounting of what you gave during this last year, I need an address. So just come to the bookstore and let me know what your address is, and we'll get you in the system that way. Calling all peacemakers. There's an 18-hour Alternatives to Violence Project basic workshop planned for February 28th through March 1st. That's a weekend. Cost is $30. This experiential workshop is now being facilitated inside of 2 correctional facilities and a high school, as well as in community workshops. If you're interested in prison work or working with youth to help them learn affirmation, communication, and conflict resolution skills, then participating in the basic workshop is the first step to becoming a facilitator. But you don't have to become a facilitator. You can just attend it for your own experience. If you're interested in hearing more, please sign up on the sheet on the table next to the welcome desk. And last but not least, I have the Lenten Bulletin booklets for this year. Lent starts the last Wednesday of February. It's kind of early this year, so pick them up in the bookstore if you want one. And if anyone would love to be a volunteer in the bookstore after the 11 o'clock service, just see me in the bookstore. Thanks.
Good morning, all. My name is Al Konigsfeld. I am the new chair of the chaplain program. And so Gary asked me if I would say a couple words about why anybody would actually want to be a chaplain. For me, I like to think of this as training wheels. We talk every week. We say there's only one presence, one power. But when we're back there holding space, we get a real experiential feel. Our eyes tell us there are a bunch of individuals here, but our heart just sees one presence. When somebody comes up to talk to me, we talk a lot in Unity about seeing the Christ in one another, but there is nothing quite as fulfilling as being able to hold the vision of the Christ in somebody who has momentarily lost it for themselves. And of course, we talk about the basis of unity being prayer and meditation. Well, that's what we do. So if you think that you would like to be a chaplain, we are going to run our training this year, March 14th, the way that we did spirit groups. So we're going to start in the morning, 9 a.m. Anybody who's even a little bit interested can come. And then if it's not your cup of tea, leave at lunch, done. But we will spend the day talking about how specifically to pray, and especially to pray out loud with another person. So please, March 14th, 9 a.m. Thank you very much.
Against your chair, feel the support as you bring your shoulders back and your heart moves forward and outward. Begin to become aware of your breath. Slowly and deeply breathing in through your nose and out through your nose. We recognize that this is a practice of presence as we invite ourselves to be present in this meditation. Letting go of our to-do list, anything that's future-oriented, and anything to do with the past, as we settle into the beauty of this moment, here and now. Breathing deeply and connecting to your heart energy. Focus your awareness on the feeling of compassion and unconditional love towards yourself and toward those around you. Breathing in compassion and breathing out unconditional love. Breathing in compassion and breathing out gratitude. As you do this, feel every layer of your being begin to radiate with love, gratitude, and compassion. And feel that sense of warmth in your heart and in your belly. And notice that warmth within you and all around you. Using the power of your heart, start to extend that loving energy outward toward those in your life, those in your household, those in this building, and into your neighborhood. Sending out this energy of compassion, unconditional love, and gratitude. As we move into the silence, imagine a wave crashing on the shore. A wave of compassion, love, and gratitude flowing outward to all around you and radiating further out, surrounding the homes and neighborhoods in our city. Continue breathing steadily in through the nose and out through the nose. As you send out this intention of healing energy, compassion, unconditional love, and gratitude. Letting it sweep out through the surrounding cities, letting it touch the edges of our state and our country, and eventually blanketing the world with this beautiful energy of unconditional love, compassion, and gratitude for the earth, the trees, and all beings. Visualize this feeling as a beautiful wave of compassion, gratitude, and love wrapping around the globe and transforming everything it washes over. Returning to focusing on your heart center, feeling that connection, and feeling into your place amongst your place in existence amongst all things, and an open-hearted space of compassion, gratitude, and unconditional love for all. Thank yourself for doing your part in cultivating more awareness, peace, and consciousness on the planet.
In the stillness of this moment, there is peace, there is peace. In the stillness of this moment, there is peace, there is peace. And I rest and trust and pray and know. In the stillness of this moment, there is peace. In the stillness of this moment, there is love. In the stillness of this moment, there is love. There is love. And I rest and trust and breathe and know. In the stillness of this moment, there is
So I just want to mention before I get started my talk that Reverend Jane is in Canada. She's in Nova Scotia, and she's with her daughter. She felt a need to be with her daughter because she's going through some things that were heavy for her, and you know how Jane is. Her heart is so willing to be present to her family and to her grandkids, and so I'm glad that we are able to support her in being able to go and be and do what she needs to be doing, and we don't feel any diminishment because of it. So that makes it nice. All right, so this is the final, my final talk on a series called the Unholy Trinity of Separation. And by Unholy Trinity, I'm referring to what Charles Eisenstein has described as being 3 habits that are the unintended consequence of living in the story of separation, or living as if we're separate and apart from each other. And those 3 habits are the habit of struggle, the habit of scarcity, and the habit of judgment. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm caught up in those habits from time to time. How about you? Anybody? And so before I get into really looking at what I'm going to land on this morning, and that is on judgment. I've talked already a bit on struggle and scarcity. I'm wanting us to kind of look at this whole idea of our sense of separation and kind of understand what that is and what our effort is on the spiritual journey. I mean, obviously, our sense of separation means, on one level, we live separate and apart from each other, and we can see how that separation, that sense of other, and all of the ways in which our diversity manifests, we can see polarity, we can see duality, we can see division, we can see separation. So we know that there is a dynamic called separation, but the greater reality, as we step aside and look from a meta-conscious point of view, and look at the dynamic of the human condition and caught up in this belief of separation, all of life doesn't feel separate from itself. I mean, you look at the animal kingdom or look at nature. There is a connection and a dependency on that connection. what I'll describe, what I'll refer to in Thich Nhat Hanh's terminology, interbeing. But if we aren't intentionally understanding that we have to compensate for what is the conditioning of our attention and awareness with respect to the dynamic of separation, we have to override that conditioning. If we are to find a sense of power and capacity to make a difference in this world that is divided, in this world where we're susceptible to the dynamics of separation, we become modulated by what's happening out there in the world. And we become vulnerable to having the state of the world inform us as to how we need to be or feel about things. And if you struggle with dealing with what's happening out there in the world and feeling overwhelmed and sensitive to it, that's just another demonstration of why it's so essential that we understand spiritually what our work is with respect to overriding the circuitry of our habits of being that are locked into the story of separation. We have to override the dimensions of our conditioned self that keep us driven in our ways of being with what's happening in our life. When 95% of our behavior is unconscious, it is incumbent upon us, if we have any discomfort in our life, to source that discomfort in the context of the unconscious ways in which we are being with what's happening in our life. And recognizing that the freedom or the relief of those discomforts happen when we can reconnect up to the field, connect up to the one, the presence, source. But let's try to understand the dynamic of separation in the context of our biblical tradition. And so far as we are given the story in Scripture in Genesis about the fall from Eden. Let's just say that the writers of Genesis were trying to describe the dynamic of the fall as how we got to this place of feeling separate and apart from our oneness, from our interconnection. And so if we look at the biblical story, Genesis, and look at it from the context of metaphysics, in the sense that we're not looking at something that isn't anything more than an allegory so much as it, but it's also relevant to us because it illustrates aspect of our own unfolding consciousness. There's a part of us that has fallen out of our sense of worthiness. There's a part of us that's fallen into a kind of sense of separation because we come to believe that we're not okay, that there's something wrong with us, that we're not good enough. And so we can see in this story a way in which we can kind of catch a glimpse as to what the effort is to kind of recover, to make our way back to this Edenic state. And if we can kind of apply quantum science to this whole conversation of really understanding the fullness of what this metaphor is, let us say that Eden represents the field of infinite possibilities, where there is no sense of separation, where there's oneness, where all things work together for good, where nothing and no one is against us. And so, but energetically, it's also a state of innocence. Adam and Eve, it's said in Scripture, didn't even know that they were naked. But after they partook of the tree, of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, all of a sudden, their reality changed. And so in some ways, we can understand that the sense of separation is born in the moment that we become cognizant of that there are two forces at work in our lives. But yet we interpret those two forces, the yin and yang, as being light and dark, as being right and wrong, as good and evil. But the reality is it's a polarity. It's a dynamic of the phenomenal world, the yin and yang of life. But we take on the belief that because now we see that we're naked and we're ashamed, and the banishment of Adam and Eve from the garden created a story that led to our belief that we're born in sin. And that original sin is a part of our legacy, our inheritance from Adam and Eve's mistake. But that's not what we take on in New Thought and Unity. We believe that our understanding of the story is that we've fallen out of an awareness of our own unique worthiness as a child of God. We've lost that connection. And because we're born in this world and Mary and Joseph weren't our parents, we didn't get a sense of that from the moment we were born and grew up in this world. So I wanted to share something from Genesis chapter 3, verses 22 to 24. And let us kind of imagine that the early writers of Scripture were trying to describe this dynamic of stepping out of the quantum field, stepping into this dimension of corporeal reality, where we're in time and space, where we have birth and death. And so here's the setup. Then the Lord God said, "Behold, man has become like one of us in knowing good and evil." So in other words, man, Adam and Eve, has become like one of us. So what's this us if there's just God? What is this plural? Right. Where is that in the context of the dimension that is God? And so here we have a sense that God is not an anthropomorphic being, but God is a presence, us. And so the dynamic is that now Adam and Eve know good and evil just like God does, or just like the presence does. And then it goes on to say that now at least we reach out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat, they will live forever. So there's two trees in the Garden of Eden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. And if they were to partake of the tree of life, they would become just like us, God. And so in order to prevent Adam and Eve from becoming just like us, or this divine presence, they're banished. And as it says, he drove man out, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he placed a cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way unto the tree of life. So there is a kind of inability to re-access this dimension of oneness, this dimension called the field of infinite possibilities, the quantum field, to access source when we come to it still believing in our separate self, still believing that we're not okay. So there is this angel of God that has this flaming sword, metaphorically, that keeps us from accessing this field of being able to manifest anything just by thought alone. We can't enter into that capacity until we lose our separate self, until we no longer live in the story of separation, until our behaviors and our way of being with what's happening in our life are in alignment with that principle of oneness. And so the effort to resolve all of the difficulty, the separation, while it is mirrored out there in the world, it lives inside of us as our own sense of separation. And when our life looks and feels against us, it's only a mirror unto our own disconnect, as opposed to some real force out there that's trying to limit or diminish us. So when there's the scripture I shared. So when we understand that there is this dynamic that kind of reinforces our sense of separation, that is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the dynamic of sorting our life out in terms of good and bad, right or wrong, instead of looking at it in the context of the polarity of yin and yang. And then when we understand also that there is this dimension of life that is metaphored by the principle of the tree of life, the tree of life represents that dimension of the infinite that is within us, that is our greater reality. And this is what Thich Nhat Hanh described as interbeing. And as we look at that principle of interbeing, in his words, he said that in one sheet of paper we see and experience everything else: the cloud, the forest, the logger. I am, therefore you are. You are, therefore I am. This is what is the meaning of the word interbeing. We enter are. And if we're able to kind of sense the reality of that, and not let any of the evidence of what's going on in the world kind of eclipse that reality just for a moment, and just be in the awareness that we enter are. We're so interdependent, and that interdependency is fragile. And as we seek to align with that principle of oneness, that principle of wholeness, then we are supported by that principle in the context of our effort to embody the difference that we can make. A difference that translates into a world that is showing up different. And then there is this: we should live our daily lives seeing everything in the light of interbeing. Then we will not be caught in our small selves. We will see our joy and our suffering. So part of the reality of awakening to our whole self is for us to feel a part of something that's larger than ourselves. I mean, would you not agree? So that awareness of being a part of something larger than ourselves is something that abides within us, so we don't have to reduce ourselves to any of those limiting beliefs. And as we recognize that that is a part of what we can aspire to bringing a presence to what we're having in the moment that's connected to this field of infinite possibilities, not allowing there being any sense or thought of limiting that expression by virtue of having to have things be a certain way, needing to be right, or any of the dynamics that have us try to manage the outer, instead of awakening to who we are and recognizing that what is within us is seeking to be expressed. And anything that is happening in the outer is simply trying to awaken us, if we're not awakened to it already. So as we recognize that the antidote to the story of separation is reconnecting back to this sense of connection, of wholeness and oneness, and that reconnection means that we have to not go there with any sense of our small self, because that dimension is guarded. We can't have access to the dimension of our higher self if we're coming to it out of our sense of human condition, out of our sense of self, out of somebody, someone, something, somewhere, and sometime. We cannot get there until we connect up to the whole. And so part of our practice has to be bringing our attention to the portal of how we access that dimension where we're already connected to this field of infinite possibilities. We just have to align in frequency to that which is seeking to modulate and express itself through us. I love this saying of Dr. Joe. Oops, I'm not there yet. Hang on a second. There we are. It has only been through the new science of the last few decades that we have begun to reconcile, to understand, and to recognize the true significance of the heart, both as a source that generates electromagnetic fields and as our connection to the unified field. So what Dr. Joe is saying, the science says, you activate the dimension of your heart, you have access to the field of infinite possibilities. But we have to override the conditioning of our head to want to be in charge of things. And when we recognize that separation, that the world of separation is generated by the BS that's happening in this world, our belief systems. Oh, you thought I meant something else? Well, you can go there too. But the point is that what separates us is in our head. What unites us is in our heart. And that that place where we're in unity with the whole gives us access to the field of infinite possibilities from which all things arise. So we either create from our sense of limitation, I either create from my sense of not enough, or I create from my worthiness. It's my choice. But I've been conditioned to create out of my unworthiness. I've been conditioned to create out of my sense that I'm a disappointment. I've been conditioned to create out of my sense that I don't matter. And yet, when I recognize, oh, okay, well, I'm doing it to myself, I have to detach from all the evidence that indicates, no, it's happening from out there. I can see it happening. And I have to recognize, no, that life is simply mirroring how I'm showing up. And that if I'm sourcing my well-being or my discomfort outside of myself, I'm looking in the wrong place. I have to source my well-being here as well as my discomfort. If I am to really own my effort, my job, my responsibility, and that is to determine how I'm going to be with what I'm having, my state. That is my work to establish my state, how I'm going to be with what is happening or what I'm having in my life. Not to let what's happening in my life determine how I'm supposed to feel or believe. And that's what we have wrong. That's the problem of the world. If we want to wake up, we'll own it all. And we'll see that, oh, well, why am I feeling this? Well, any uncomfortable feelings connected to a belief that we have about ourselves. It's that simple. If we take time to follow the thread of that discomfort, it'll land on, I'm not good enough. I'm not okay. I'm a disappointment. It'll land on something that we're carrying with us. And that's the issue. And until we address that, we cannot see a reflection that is mirroring the wholeness, the truth of us. We see instead what is generated by our soul that keeps us in relationship with our unconscious self that try to wake us up. So if we can recognize that the heart is the portal to the quantum field, is the portal to accessing the intelligence of our higher self, our intuitive self, is a way in which we can eclipse the influence of our conditioned mind, our habits of being, doing, having, feeling, perceiving, and believing. If we can understand that we can access an awareness, an intelligence, and a field, and begin to see that it can have influence over the dynamics of the external world. In other words, we can influence what's happening in our life by virtue of where we are within ourselves. And to be able to see how that can therefore be a kind of practice that we can bring into our life that increases our sense of empowerment, our sense of utility, our sense of capacity. And so I'm going to share a video that Dr. Joe shares at some of his retreats, trainings, that illustrates what happens when we understand that there is a power, a dimension that is not in our head, but rather in the place where intention and yearning arise from our heart. And it has a way of drawing into itself precisely what it needs. So check this out.
French researcher named René Piaget. In his experiments, he built a robot that contained a computerized movement generator that would make the robot move randomly. He then put it into an arena that he built that would track the movements of the robot. As you would expect, the robot would over time cover most of the entire arena through its random movements. But when René Piaget hatched baby chicks next to the robot to make the baby chicks think the robot was its mother, and then he placed the baby chicks next to the arena so that they could see the robot, but couldn't move towards it, the intentions of the baby chicks to be close to the robot influenced the random computer movements and caused the robot to move only in the half of the arena closest to the baby chicks. Think about that. If the intentions and perceptions of baby chicks can influence the behavior of a randomized computer robot in its environment, imagine how your thoughts, perceptions, and intention may be influencing yours. Science is beginning to establish that our minds literally create our reality.
Wow. News? Is that news for you? No, hopefully not. So there's a maroon Chrysler with their lights left on in the parking lot, license plate B as in Bravo, K as in Kilo, L as in Lima, 3350. Lights are on. Chrysler, maroon. Okay. So isn't that amazing how those little chicks can influence that random number generator, that little robot? And Jane did in her doctoral research, used a random number generator in her doctoral research, which she had a group of folks who came and practiced the heart lock-in as a way of preparing to treat water, as what she was studying. And so the random number generator began to really be affected by the time they started the heart lock-in until the time they completed it. And it was significant. So we do have the power to influence our external world, but we need to connect up with it, not with our head, but with our higher self, the dimension of ourself that is already aligned with the intent to bring forth this aspect of who and what we really are to really matter in this world. I mean, we're on the transition team. The world as we know it is in transition. And I'd rather be on the transition team having some voice in how I'm going to be with what's happening so that I can contribute to its unfolding in a healthy way. We need to kind of acknowledge that we have to be diligent with respect to why we gather. We're here as a spiritual community because it takes a community effort to really hold the space for us to be very clear about what our spiritual journey is, what is the effort. And so we struggle with what's happening in our life. That's one of the habits of living in the sense of separation. But the way out of struggle, of trying to manage our life by getting more, is by being more. And what I mean by being more worthy, being more understanding, being more present, being more curious, being more willing to kind of open your hearts. And that leads to revelation, that leads to insight, that leads to hearing guidance. All the ways in which the universe is trying to move us into a way of mattering in this world. We just have to align with that signal, that voice, and allow it to move us. And I talked last time also about the struggle of dealing with insufficiency or lack, and how that our first effort might be to try to get more when we're in that sense of not enough. But once again, being more worthy, recognizing our own worth, and seeing that our insufficiency in the outer is really connected to our own deeper insufficiency with respect to ourself. And doing that deeper healing work, knowing our worth, being compassionate with ourselves is really integral to experiencing a more abundant life. And then finally, I'm going to land today on judgment. And so far as part of the dynamic of our struggles in life and our insufficiency in our life is what happens as we are trying to make sense of our experience in this world. And so it's important to kind of recognize, okay, everybody knows that judgment is an issue. I mean, we either react to someone's judgment by being triggered, or we're judgy ourselves by pointing out what's wrong. And so either way, we have somebody or something the matter with us. Of course, nobody does that here, right? But we almost do that as a normal thing. It's normal for us to be pointing the finger at what's wrong with what's happening in politics and every place else. And I'm not judging our judging. I'm wanting us to understand the dynamics so we can kind of show up in a different energy. And so if we kind of see judgment as being almost a kind of coping strategy, that our judging mind is just trying to cope. And one of the ways in which we can cope is to kind of separate ourselves with somebody that has cooties. You know, kind of find a place to kind of manage what's going on, and if we can get it further enough away from our sense of who we are, then we can be more equipped, perhaps. But I've talked in other times about judgment and working with judgment, and I've written about it in my book, The Eye of the Storm. But basically, if we kind of recognize that the dynamic of judgment is also linked to how our brain works. Our brain is hardwired to judge. That's how it keeps us safe, continually scanning for threats. And yet we've superimposed upon that mechanism of self-preservation a way in which to sort out the good and the bad, the right and the wrong. Because you see, we've all grown up in the legacy of having partaken of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So we can't help to do that. But when we recognize that that behavior is symptomatic of a larger issue, that means that we're still asleep. We're still living in our small self. We still have fear driving our meaning making. If we can use our sense of, yeah, I'm judgy, or I react to judgment, okay, that's just symptomatic of the dynamic we're caught up in. And the way out of that dynamic is first understanding that's what our brain does, so we can recognize that. Then we need to understand a little bit more about the dynamic of judgment. So when someone judges you and you react, you make what that judgment was supposed to be about. Instead, you make it about you. So for instance, my previous wife, previous to Jane, Nan, she would always commonly say, Gary, you never take me out to dinner. And she'd have reason to say that. It's because I travel a lot. I was director of peacemaking services for the Unity Movement at the time. And so I'd come home and I'd get all this, you never take me out to dinner. And so I'd say, well, what do you mean I never take you out to dinner? Don't you remember Chinese, Mexican, Chinese, Mexican, Chinese, Mexican? We'd always argue about where we're going to have dinner. And, I have friends who we've been out to dinner with. So, it happens. I do take you out to dinner. But the reality is that is her judgment, you never take me out to dinner, about dinner. What is it about then? Who knows what it's about? But you see, when I react, I make it about me now. This is about me not wanting to feel guilty or feeling like I'm, not present. But if it's really not, if instead it's about her, then my reaction actually shut her down, my defensiveness. But I mentioned in a previous talk that what we need to say in the presence of someone's judgment, if we care about them in the relationship, is we need to say, tell me more. Right, and then what happens? Well, they give it more to you, Well, whenever you're gone, it seems like everything breaks down. Okay, say more about that. And then finally it lands on, and boy, you've been gone so much, I miss being with you. Okay, there it is. So the judgment, you never take me out to dinner, is, Gary, I really need to be with you. But when I defend myself, it can never be about what that need is that she has. So what if everyone's judgment is really about what's missing for them? Or what's missing in the relationship? Or maybe it's about something I said or did that created some separation. If the relationship matters to me, then it matters to me if that's what it's really about. And if that's what it's really about, her judgment is for me. Ooh. What if all judgments, while they're not about you, are for you? What if that's what's really going on? And when we understand that that's the reality of the human dynamic that is rooted in the story of separation, because our brain is hardwired to sort out its safety issues, and when we understand that that's what's really going on, and then we come back and be in the experience of someone judging us, or we pointing the finger at somebody and recognizing, no, my finger point is about me. Or when someone's judging us, their judgment is about what's missing for them. I can be in that experience totally free. totally free. So I got to give you an example of how judgment is for me. So let me pick one. So I was back in that relationship with Nan before she passed away. I was director of peacemaking services for the International Association of Unity Churches. I traveled all over the Unity movement to help deal with conflict. Well, I would also train others to do this work, and so I was at a training in someplace on the East Coast, and after a training, I'd spend 8-10 hours in front of people, and as many of you know, I'm an introvert, and so when I put that much energy in public, it's typical for me to want to retire or retreat so I can recharge. Well, this was 20, 30 years ago, and I'm still kind of that way. But back then, it was also my practice to go to the bar and have a libation or two as a part of my unwinding. Of course, that's probably, we wouldn't expect a minister to need to do that, but that was my practice. Anyway, in the bar, this was at a resort and a golf course, and there's all these golfers who are kind of at a tournament, and I was in one corner. And there's some music and dancing. And so a woman comes up and asks me to dance. And I, I'm not interested. I'm by myself. I'm married. That's not my scene. And so after a while, she comes back and sits down and starts talking to me and wants to know why I'm here and what I'm doing. And I talk, and then she finally says, "You sure you don't want to dance?" And I said, "No, I'm good." And so I started to get up and leave, and she turns around and she says, "You're sad. You're sad." Okay, all right. So, I don't know what to make of that. So I go off back to my room. Well, in the middle of the night, I get woken up by this huge pain in the back of my neck. And I begin to try to deal with it, and it's becoming worse. It's becoming to the point where I have to get out of bed, and I have to get down on the floor. And as I'm working to try to figure out what is this pain, I find myself finding relief in eventually assuming a posture that was the fetal position on the floor. And then the voice came into my head and said, "What is this feeling you have?" And I said, "Sadness." I was sad. So that judgment, to make a long story short, was all about mirroring some pent-up energy that I had around my own sadness in my life. And I'm not, at the time, I was not someone who was into feeling one's feelings completely. And so I had built up quite a large reservoir of sadness. It was, by this time, I had already been married 5 times. So you can the amount of past life experience, accumulation of sadness, was what got processed then. All right. So I'm wanting now to complete my conversation with you. So we're going to now have an object lesson. So if you want to get your Chinese finger lock. Finger lock, yes, that's right. And so we want to understand that if you don't have one, raise your hand. I don't have a way of, raise your hand. There's Susan over here, has her hand up. And then there's got Lois. Okay, so if we go ahead and you guys don't have one? Okay, you have one? Okay, good. Heidi's already been through this. So if you go ahead and get yourself kind of snug there in the lock, you'll see that the way this thing works is that it tightens up the more that we pull out, right? The more that we look outside of ourselves is where the real struggle begins to reveal its restriction and its tightness around us. And so this is how we are when we believe that we're in a kind of separation where our effort is to get out of something as opposed to use what's happening in our life as a way of really freeing ourselves to a greater experience. So while our thumbs, as we pull out, have, just like our attention, a tendency to look out there for resolution, the practice is that we have to turn within in prayer, like this. And then it's easy to free ourselves. Okay? So it's like this. Prayer. And then we release. So, when you find yourself in struggle, lack, or judgment, turn your attention inward. Turn your attention to your heart. Activate your own felt experience of gratitude, self-compassion, and appreciation. And then extend your awareness into the field independent of any sense of self, any sense of who you are, your body, your identity, your roles, your responsibilities, what's going on in your life, and just connect and linger in that state of connection. And then be in the awareness that your higher self is there to guide you and to bring you into a conscious and intentional relationship with that dimension. You know, Jesus called his higher self Abba, Abba Father. And he had a relationship with that dimension of himself that was no less than a father-son relationship. And as we aspire to that same relationship within ourselves, to connect up with our higher self, with the presence, then we activate a connection that enables us to be with whatever we're having as our abundance. And then when we know that what we have is our abundance, then we know that it's ours to use as if it was our abundance. And then when we get practice in doing that, we will find that whatever we're having is a stepping stone to a greater good. All right, that's the end of the series. I'm done. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gary. Unity stands for peace in the presence of conflict, and for love in the presence of hatred, and for forgiveness in the presence of injury. Unity honors the many names to God, the many paths to God, for we know that there is only one power, one presence, and one life. So whoever you are and wherever you are on your spiritual journey of transformation, you are always welcome here. We would especially like to welcome anyone who's here for the first time today. If you are comfortable enough raising your hand, our ushers have a gift packet for you. Diane, or Alan, there's a lady in the back. And then you have a couple here in the middle. So on the outside of that packet is a form that you can fill out to be added to the mailing list for our weekly e-newsletter updates and our quarterly newsletters. So if you're interested in that, do fill that out and drop that in the love offering bag as it comes by instead of giving a donation today. And also after the service, you can take that to the barista stand for a free drink of your choice, and you can also take it to the bookstore and get a recording of today's service. Thank you for coming. We are certainly glad that you are here today. We're also thankful for those joining us online this morning. So I think now is time to do our welcome song.
That's right, Charlie.
Okay.
Have you stand if you can. We're going to sing We're All Friends Here. We are all friends here. There are no strangers once you walk inside that door. We welcome you to linger in our family of love. And hold you in our hearts the way you are. We are all friends here. There are no strangers once you walk inside that door. We welcome you to linger in our family of love. And hold you in our hearts the way you are. Well, we are all friends. There are no strangers once you walk inside our door. We welcome each other. Open our hearts the way you are. Yes, we welcome you to make your family. Open our hearts the way you are.
Now it's time to celebrate our abundance together as we share in our community giving. I invite you to hold your offering in your hand, and if you are joining us online, you can use the Donate tab that is on our website. We're going to take this moment to sink into our hearts and bring forth a feeling of gratitude and generosity. Let's say our community giving blessing together. I know that my giving blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I receive. I give thanks for the abundance that is mine to share.
Well, our song this morning has everything to do with Black History Month. This is a song that you know, Arlo Guthrie's song. It was probably its most famous rendition. But this sister, this black woman named Rosetta Tharpe, made this song popular in the 1950s. She was born in 1915, died in 1973. She was an American singer, songwriter, guitarist, recording artist. She literally was indoctrinated into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame about 10 years ago. And she became famous in the 1930s and 1940s by doing a unique mix of gospel with spiritual lyrics and rock and roll accompaniment. She actually influenced Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, and Johnny Cash.
And Sean Wright.
And Sean And so this is the way she performed this song, and we'll see if you recognize it. This train was bound for glory. This train, well, this train was bound for glory. This train was bound for glory. It don't carry nothing but the righteous and holy. This train was bound for glory. This train. Well, this train is solid black. Yeah, this train. Well, this train is solid black. Well, this train is solid black. Just when you go there, well, you don't come back. Well, this train is bound for glory. This train. Well, this train don't fit no transportation on this train. Well, this train, it don't fit no transportation on this train. Well, this train, it don't fit no transportation. It's no Jim Crow and no discrimination. This train, it's bound for glory. This train. Well, this train don't care if you're white or black. This train. Well, this train, you don't care if you're white or black. Not this train. Well, this train don't care if you're white or black. Just be treated like a man. Get on that track, 'cause in all this train, it's bound for this train is bound for glory. This train, well, this train is bound for glory. It don't carry nothing but the righteous and holy. This train is bound for glory. This train. Now imagine taking that out on the road good. This train is bound for glory. This train. Well, this train is bound for glory. This train. This train is bound for glory. Don't carry nothing but the righteous and holy. This train is bound for glory. This train. Now this train is bound for glory. This train. She's on YouTube. You can go look this one up if you want. Well, this train is bound for glory. This train. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tani. Thank you, Sean. Wonderful. I think you're dying to do Footloose. Awesome. Well, we give thanks for these gifts and for those who have given them as we send them forth and to bless our world. And as we are giving thanks for these gifts that we receive here at Unity Spiritual Center, we want to take time to thank all those in service to our ministry. And today we are saying thank you to the Crosswalk volunteers. Diane is already standing. Is there anybody else? Bob, thank you. Everyone that's part of that team, thank you for your service. We very much are grateful for all that you do for Crosswalk. Our chaplains today is Cheryl and Al. One of them has been holding the service. Let's see. It's been holding the entire service in prayer. Our chaplains are here for you, so if there's something that might be heavy on your heart or something you'd like to celebrate, they will be up here after the service, and they will hold it in prayer with you. You can also fill out a prayer request form that is in the pockets in front of you. We have a box at the back of the sanctuary and another one out in the foyer. Feel free to drop it in there, and our prayer team will pray over that for 7 days, and then it'll go on to Silent Unity and be prayed over for another 30 days. Also in the front pockets is a visitation form for anybody that you know might be in the hospital and like a visit from the chaplain team. You can also place that in the prayer box. Alan, do we have any children out there? Well, let's welcome in our children.
Beautiful. Hi, my name is Danica. I am a representative of our YOU over here. And we have a special treat today. We have a bake sale going on. All of the proceeds are going to be going to our camps in order to further our spiritual growth within the church and be able to share that knowledge with you guys. So when you go out, there is going to be some tables to the left, and there are tongs for certain things because it's more of a put together your own bag slash plate thing. We do have a couple bags that have nuts in them, but those are separated for those who have allergies. There is a gluten-free table, and so we ask that you guys do not move the tongs around just so we don't cross-contaminate with gluten-free and stuff. So thank you guys so much.
Well, if anything gets cross-contaminated, I'll eat it. We are very grateful for all our young ones here, as well as those that are in service to our young ones, and also for YOU in bringing their baked goods today. So let's bless our children. All right. Be the love you are. Sing the song you hear. Share the joy of life with people far and near. And let's do that for ourselves. Be the love we are. Sing the song we hear. Share our joy of life with people far and near. All right, you guys. Let's go find your essential person that brought you today. Well, please stand if you are able and join together for our closing prayer, and we'll follow that with our peace song. All right, the light of God surrounds us. I am the love of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love of God. The light of God resurrects us. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And that's the truth.
Practice this week focusing on activating your heart and connecting up with your higher self. God bless you. We'll see you next time.
Trinity